I've been wanting to do an episode on the role of alcohol in sales forever. I did a bunch of research. I found it to be kind of interesting, but then I had a revelation. There is a seemingly incredible irony in what happened during the 1920s. The sales profession was essentially gross up until the late 1800s. It was earning respectability in the early 1900s by distancing itself from the stereotype of the drinking, backslapping drummer. But then came Prohibition, which made alcohol a powerful selling tool. I had to make it episode 1 of season 6. So here goes.
Welcome to the Sales History Podcast, the show that uncovers the forgotten stories, ideas, pioneers, and moments that shaped the sales profession and what they can teach us about selling, leading, and earning trust today. Here's your host, 3-time award-winning author, certified speaking professional keynote speaker, go-to-market sales trainer, and sales nerd, Todd Caponi.
Let's start by going back to the 1800s. The typical traveling salesman of the time was known as being loud, had a big personality, carried around a suitcase or saddlebags of samples of whatever they were selling, and they probably had a drink too. During that time, alcohol and selling were tightly connected. This is before cars, airplanes, Zoom. There was these people called drummers. They were called this because first they drummed up business from town to town, but in some cases they actually banged drums entering different communities or as buyers came along. They were essentially nomads, so they traveled in train cars, they didn't have homes, they lived in whatever hotel they happened to be in that night. The hotels themselves certainly supported this line of work. That's their customers, and many had what they called sample rooms, where buyers could inspect merchandise during the day. So the drummers might go around and say, hey, come by the hotel, could check out what I'm selling. But then the relationships happened after dinner. So many times they were in the hotel bar boozing it up all night. It was hospitality and it was the cost of doing business. The people who were making the stuff the drummers were out selling expected these salespeople to entertain potential customers. These guys were known for their drinking, their storytelling, and being the life of the party. Now, as you know, I've got essentially a sales history museum here in my home, and I have these things called drummers' yarns from the 1800s, and they contain jokes and stories that drummers could tell on the road to make their customers laugh. I have pictures of the drinking and laughing going on the trains. I mean, these drummers became a part of American culture, and the liquor associated with it went right along with it. Now, as the 19th century wound down, the profession was starting to grow up. We were entering the progressive era of the Industrial Revolution, and that meant companies were growing, products were becoming more sophisticated, and those companies started hiring and training their own sales representatives. The two biggest sales pioneers, well, according to me and my research, of course, were Arthur Sheldon and John Patterson of NCR. Now, Sheldon was writing about the science of salesmanship. He was creating these correspondence courses, and his entire theme was around service. As you've heard me say many times, my favorite quote of his was, quote, "True salesmanship is the science of service. Grasp that thought firmly and never let go." The sentiment was that, quote, "The day is gone when a man can hit booze and be a tough and still make good as a salesman. No man can become a real salesman until he can learn to control his own body and his mind and soul." So the profession was leaving behind the old stereotype, and they were doing it successfully. No more drinking drummers. Now we had professional, disciplined individuals who understood their role was to help customers achieve successful outcomes. Do it quickly, do it transparently, and do it at the right price. When that happens, all ships rise, which means everyone, and it also includes the overall U.S. position in the world as a potential superpower. So I found a quote from 1916 in an article called "Salesmanship is a Profession." It's from Price's Carpet and Rug News magazine, of all places, but the quote is great, and it says this: "The salesman occupies a responsible position in society. He is necessarily a man of integrity, and he must be a man of poise. He must be a good mixer without becoming a bore, and it is necessary for him to be alert every minute of his waking hours." We quote from the Evening Globe of this city, which says, "The 100% salesman is the man who measures up to the highest standards of business ability, intellectuality, respectability, and reliability, must be of big caliber morally, spiritually, and temperamentality." So we're doing well as a profession in the 1910s. People want to be in it. Schools were teaching it. Colleges, even high schools, men and women were seeing it as a great skill and a career. You had then sitting President Woodrow Wilson being the keynote speaker at a sales conference in 1916, and drinking isn't a contributing factor at all. All right, here comes the irony. The 18th Amendment was ratified in 1919. What it was is it banned the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors for beverage purposes in the United States. So, no, it didn't ban drinking. It just made making it and selling it illegal. Now, the way that it was written is that it required 3/4 of the states to ratify it itself. And if that didn't happen within 7 years, the amendment would just expire. But the states accomplished that threshold in just over a year. So it happened pretty quickly, which led to something called the Volstead Act, which essentially explained how it would work. So now that it's been ratified and it's in place, here's the rules. Couple of things. So number one, it defined intoxicating liquor as anything containing more than 0.5% alcohol. That's one proof. It also created penalties for manufacturing and selling alcohol. It established a federal enforcement system and defined a couple of exceptions. Like, for example, medicinal whiskeys were illegal, so doctors could actually prescribe it and pharmacies could fill it. And wine remained legal for religious ceremonies. But if you legally owned alcohol before Prohibition began, you could keep it in your home and drink it. And so wealthy Americans stockpiled it right before the act became official. Now, the goal of the amendment and act was to remove alcohol, that if you couldn't make it, it would slowly disappear, with the belief that society's problems would disappear along with it. Well, as you know, that didn't happen. Scarcity changed psychology like a modern-day Cialdini. In a 1925 article in Sales Management magazine called "Buying Business Via Booze," the author wrote that what essentially happened with the Volstead Act was, quote, "It put a halo around a bottle of whiskey and gave it an entirely new value in the eyes of thousands of people." In other words, before it, drinking was pretty ordinary, and after it, it became extraordinary. Having whiskey signaled access, connections, status, and exclusivity. Only the cool kids had it, and you, of course, wanted to be one of the cool kids. The article called out some incredible stories. One company reportedly kept whiskey locked in the company's safe. Whenever an important buyer checked into town, a bottle would be delivered directly to their hotel room. Another story involved a national organization that spent more than $30,000 entertaining convention attendees with liquor. That's in the 1920s. So that $30,000, that would be more than $500,000 today. The conventions became booze fests. Companies that didn't have all of that liquor stockpiled were complaining about those who did, having an unfair advantage. Like, reading that article, that part cracked me up. It wasn't a product or solution advantage. It was the haves versus the have-nots of alcohol. That's crazy, right? At the time, there were tons of debates about whether the laws actually were reducing drinking. Now, there was an executive from a company called Haywood Wakefield who believed it definitely reduced the amount of drinking going on, but he added a phrase that I found pretty funny. He argued that, quote, vocal drinking was way up. Essentially, people were talking about drinking now constantly. They were joking about it. The people talking may not actually be drinking much at all, but there was an image associated with it. Like I said, the cool kids all drink, and so do I. He told the story of a salesperson who made one bottle of whiskey last 18 months, a sign that actual drinking could potentially be down, even though it felt to many from all the chatter that it was way up. This is the thing that's fascinating to me. Laws and regulations meant to make alcohol go away instead actually brought it back into prominence in the sales profession. The pendulum started to swing. Leaders like a person named George F. Earnshaw, he was the president of the Earnshaw Sales Company, who said this, quote, "Our line is only as successful as the department and the buyer who conducts it. We endeavor each time we call upon a customer to have some service information which will assist her in disposing of merchandise. It is not necessary that this information be relative to our own line of goods." So first of all, I read that line like 3 times because that's transparency. That's back to the service mindset. But then he hammered it home with this line. Ideas are of more value than booze. Prohibition lasted almost 13 years. By the early 1930s, organized crime had flourished. I mean, my last name is Caponi. I live in the Chicago area. So growing up, that meant that many had and still do joke to me about Al Capone. The other issue was that tax revenue was way down. The Great Depression was in full swing and public opinion had shifted. So on December 5th, 1933, the 21st Amendment repealed Prohibition. Alcohol returned to legality. Its scarcity disappeared, and along with it, much of its power as a status symbol. Corporate America went back to formalizing entertainment policies, expense reporting, gift limits, conflict of interest rules, and the profession started its way back towards actual professionalism again. So to put a bow on this, I find this to be an incredible story. The sales profession wanted to be known for service, being an actual profession on the level of doctors and lawyers. Salespeople being an aid and a guide to buyers. Backslapping and drinking were out. Consultation, guiding was in. Prohibition was designed to eliminate alcohol from society. For the sales profession, at the time, the forgotten depression of the early 1920s brought about high-pressure sales approaches, which was the beginning of the end of the respect for the profession. Prohibition made the perception of sales actually considerably worse. Liquor used to be an ordinary courtesy, especially in sales. Now it became a business advantage, and the companies that had alcohol used it as such. It's so amazing to me that companies started competing on whether they had booze or not. Today, entertainment is still a part of selling, of course. Maybe a suite to a ball game, an exclusive dinner, could be an experience, maybe even a special discount. I guess, where is the line between hospitality versus winning on something other than the merit of the actual solution? That's always the question. A line from a 1927 edition of Furniture World magazine stood out. It said, quote, "You can be pretty sure that when a salesman has to offer a buyer a drink to make him buy, that the merchandise is as bad as the booze." And then it went on to say, quote, "It doesn't speak very highly of the buyers either if they can't buy without first taking a drink." It always goes back to that Sheldon quote. True salesmanship is the science of service. Grasp that thought firmly and never let go. So there you have it. I know there are more podcasts out there than any of us could possibly listen to. So the fact that you choose to spend a little of your time with me truly means a ton. The Sales History Podcast here, it's a passion project for me. I don't monetize it. I don't have ads. I don't plan to. I just love discovering these forgotten concepts and stories and then unloading what I've learned on people like you who appreciate the history of our profession as much as I do. If you'd like to support the show, the very best way to do that is to subscribe wherever you listen, leave a rating or review if your podcast app allows it, and then maybe tell another salesperson or history buff about it too. So till next time, thanks again for listening.